Today on Retire with Purpose, 5 quirky IRA rules you've probably never heard of, if you should self-insure or purchase long-term care insurance, and where does the stock market go next?
Are you prepared to retire with purpose? To retire knowing your savings is invested to meet unavoidable needs and expenses.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
Certified financial planner Casey Weade is president of Howard Bailey, an advisory firm that believes successful retirement begins with a detailed financial plan personalized to help achieve your life's purpose.
Whatever risk you faced, we've got a plan.
The Howard Bailey team is committed to practical financial planning so you can enjoy family and the future without uncertainty or stress. Stay tuned and learn how you too can retire with purpose.
Good to see you again. I am Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade, certified financial planner and the president at Howard Bailey Financial. You know, one of the keys to building wealth is staying on top of your taxes, and that's why we're starting the program today with an article from Financial Planning Magazine. It has to do with the 5 quirky rules of IRAs that you've never heard of. Now, Casey included it in the weekend reading for retirees and pre-retirees. You can get onto that mailing list by just going to retirewithpurpose.com. You see the link there for weekend reading. Click that, drop your email, and once a week, Casey will send you an email with several articles that I think you're going to find helpful. Also, his commentary on why they're worth your time. So, weekend reading for retirees, it's worth taking a good look at. So, Casey, this article again, 5 quirky IRA things that you probably didn't know about. Why this one?
Well, I like this article because, one, it's written by Ed Slott, one of the premier IRA experts in the country, and we go through his training program as advisors every year, especially important after we saw what came out of the Trump tax plan, that there are a lot of rules that affected your IRAs that I think as advisors we need to be aware of. And we spend a lot of our time reading articles that are written by Ed or just articles in general that have to do with taxes and IRAs so that we're staying on top of the latest trends, because there are regulatory changes that come out periodically that we need to be aware of. But I think it's important for you to see what we're reading, and then you really understand the recommendations and why we're making them. And Ed is a really sharp guy. He understands all of the rules inside and out, and this article really outlined some really truly quirky rules that are out there regarding some regarding IRAs. And I think this just goes on to show us how complex these things really are. It's not as simple as I just put money in, I get a tax deduction, I take it out, and I pay taxes down the road. It can be much more complex than that. And there can be some very serious penalties that apply if you don't understand the rules. There's also some really neat opportunities if you understand the rules.
Well, the first one of those rules we want to focus on is a special rule for military death benefits.
That's right. Military death benefits or gratuities can actually be taken and put entirely into a Roth IRA in a lump sum. And that's a really big deal. It might not affect a ton of individuals, but the ones that it does affect, it can have a huge and just a monumental impact on the success of that family's financial situation for the rest of their lives. You know, usually you're limited to how much you can put into a Roth IRA in the realm of $6,000 to $20,000, depending on your age and your income. But when we look at that's just a massive amount of dollars that can go into an account that can grow tax-free for the rest of your life. And it can grow tax-free, being that that $500,000 death benefit is going to grow in there and it's never going to be taxed again. As it grows, it turns into $1 million. Then it can all be withdrawn as $1 million tax-free. And that's a really neat benefit for military families. And it just goes to show you that these are really complex rules, and if we understand how they work, they can lead to maximum benefit.
So let's say I inherit an IRA. Can that be converted into a Roth?
Well, an inherited IRA cannot be converted to a Roth IRA. And we've had families that have come in, they've inherited IRAs, and they said, you know, I would like to convert my other IRAs to Roth, given what's going on with the Trump tax plan. It's a huge opportunity for me to save a buttload of money in doing those conversions and taking that money out of the IRA in a low tax rate today, knowing it'll probably be higher down the road, let it grow tax-free forever. That's a great thing for a lot of people, but with inherited IRAs, it doesn't work. But the quirky part is that it will work with a qualified plan. So if you pass away with a 401k, 403b, 457, those dollars can be converted to a Roth IRA, but only if you have a designated beneficiary on your 401k, 403b. If that ends up getting left to the estate, then the beneficiaries lose that option. They lose a lot of options if you don't don't have beneficiaries on your retirement accounts, and that's why it's so important to do just that basic estate planning for you and your family.
What is the quirky rule on how many IRAs I can roll over in a year?
Well, when it comes to IRA rollovers, you can only do an indirect rollover once a year. So that is when you actually take a check and then take a check out of an IRA, put it back into a different IRA. You have 60 days to do that. That's known as a 60-day rollover. If you do more than one of those, then they're going to be excluded. So the second one you do, anything you do beyond the first one is now going to be a taxable event. So you'll have to pay ordinary income taxes at your highest marginal tax rate when you do that if you do more than one. This is why we always recommend you do direct transfers. And I think this should be a pretty widely known rule. However, I think the quirky part is that it also applies when we pass away to surviving spouses. So if we have a surviving spouse and you have multiple IRAs, they need to be doing direct transfers from those IRAs to a new IRA that's going to be their spousal IRA. If they start taking checks, they're going to have a real problem.
All right, let's jump into this one real quick. Can I make an IRA contribution after I die?
Well, weird, right? You'd think, well, I had income this year. I passed away midway through the year. I've got an IRA. Why shouldn't I be able to go ahead and make a contribution to reduce my taxes? Because that's what I've done forever. The IRS says, well, you're not going to have retirement. So, well, why would you need to make a contribution to a retirement account? You know, a very logical response. It's difficult to argue with. However, the quirky part is if you have a simple IRA or a SEP IRA, you can still make those contributions before the tax deadline.
Pretty weird rules. It's important to know exactly what's going on in that part of the world, and that's one of the reasons that I hope you'll be a member of the Howard Bailey family by calling the number on your screen and request a meeting with a Howard Bailey advisor. It's a complimentary review of your particular scenario. Are there tax opportunities that you might be missing? What about fees and expenses you're paying that you can escape? And then how much risk is in your portfolio? Those are all some of the things you have to take a look at when you sit down with a member of the Howard Bailey team as part of this complimentary financial review, and I hope you'll use the number on your screen to get on the calendar. All right, we're back in just a second. We're answering your questions, so stay with us.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
It's your retirement. How will you live it? How will you be remembered?
Will you be able to take me on vacation?
Will you be there for my ball games?
Will you teach me your values? You'll be able to play with me.
Oh, help me go to college. How will I remember you?
Time for us to answer viewer questions, and we start with Greg in Fort Wayne.
Can I set up a TOD on my house if I don't have a mortgage?
Greg, you're asking a really good question because there's a lot of folks that are unaware of even being able to put a TOD on their house. And you can't do this in every state, but in Indiana, also Ohio, you have the ability to put a transfer on death deed on your house. And so that ensures that your house passes on to your heirs and avoids probate. Otherwise, that house, if it pays into your estate, then it's going to go through the probate process. If you have a will, then that's a letter to the judge, and then that'll essentially lead the judge down the road of probate still, but ultimately that house should still get to your heirs. And probate isn't nearly as painful and inexpensive of a process as it used to be. However, if we can avoid anything that might hold up the whole process of transferring those assets onto our heirs, then it's something that we want to take advantage of. We can just make that very difficult time for our children, for our spouse, that much easier, then we should. And we can do that by putting a transfer on death in place, not just on your house, but you can also do that for your brokerage accounts, if you have joint accounts, if you have bank accounts. You can even put transfer on death deeds on your vehicles at this point. So that enables you to set those assets up, make sure they avoid probate, and it's very easy. It's a very inexpensive process. You can actually download the form online, typically for a few bucks, fill it out, make sure it gets notarized, make sure it gets registered, and you have to make sure it gets filed. But once that takes place, then you've got a TOD set up on your house. And we've done that in our family, and And my mom has that done on her house. We have it done on our house. I think it's a good thing to do. We encourage a lot of the families we do work with to do that. And I've had that question before. If we don't have a mortgage, why could we still set up this TOD? And yes, this can get set up regardless of whether you have a mortgage or not. I think the moral of the story here is, for a lot of people, estate planning, basic estate planning, like setting up proper beneficiary designations, getting a medical directive, a basic will, it doesn't have to be that expensive. And many times it doesn't even mean that you have to meet with an attorney in order to get those things drafted and appropriately filed.
Oh, good to know. Hey, Jody in Millersburg reached out with a question about long-term care.
My husband and I are in our late 70s with more money saved than we need. Why would we buy long-term care insurance instead of just self-insuring?
Well, Jody, in your late 70s, traditional long-term care insurance is probably going to be next to impossible to actually qualify for. On our one of our most recent podcasts, Retire with Purpose podcast, we had Professor Jamie Hopkins, who addressed this issue of when we should be filing and when we should be applying, I should say, for long-term care insurance. And he said as soon as possible. And in his mind, that number is really 50. By the time we get to be 60 plus, it gets more difficult to qualify for and much more expensive. And those risks can happen, and we can have things actually occur where we have a long-term care expense well before 60. I know a couple that are in their 40s that are dealing with overcoming long-term care expenses at this time in their life, and it's very challenging. So with that, I would say it's going to be difficult to do post-70, but there are other options that you can look into outside of just self-insuring, because I think it's important for people to understand what self-insuring really means. Sometimes we hit, well, I'm just going to self-insure. Well, that means you're going to pay for it. Okay, so really, I think rather than saying self-insuring, I think we should just say we're going to pay for the expense should it arise. And so you have to ask yourself, is that something that really bothers you? If you have a $100,000 a year expense, you end up having $100,000 less in your estate that could have been left in and continued to compound with interest over time and left behind to your heirs. Is that a problem? Or do you not really mind spending that $100,000 or even $500,000 if you're in there for 5 years or more on long-term care expenses? And so yes, one, let's understand self-insuring means that we're actually going to spend our own dollars. And then we have to look into those alternatives, because we can't qualify for traditional long-term care insurance. So there's these hybrid products that are available out there today. You can look into long-term care combination annuities, long-term care combination life insurance policies, and even in your 70s, you might still be able to qualify for these things because they're not looking at morbidity, they're looking at mortality. And in your 70s, you could still have a lot of longevity left, even though there's some morbidity risks. And when you look at long-term care insurance, they're concerned about both of those things and more so morbidity. So let's say you had $100,000 sitting idly in a bank somewhere, and you weren't actually making any interest on it, little to no interest. You might be able to take that $100,000, set it aside in a vehicle that applies a multiplier to that. Maybe it turns that $100,000 into $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 for the use of long-term care, and it's really just moving money from one pocket to the next. It doesn't cost you a premium, and now you have some benefits that can protect some of that life savings so you can pass more on to the next generation or your spouse for that matter.
Good question again. And our last question comes from email. Scott over in Payne, Ohio writes, do you ever use mutual funds, or have they been all replaced by ETFs?
So when it comes to mutual funds, ETFs, I get this question where we say, well, what's an ETF? What's an exchange traded fund? I think most people are really familiar with mutual funds. So if we just take a step back initially, mutual funds have been around for decades. And these are vehicles that allow you to put money into a diversified portfolio, professionally managed, and get yourself invested in that diversified portfolio with a much smaller dollar amount than if you wanted to go out and buy yourself a whole portfolio of individual stocks. ETFs work the same way, but they are actually traded on the exchange, so you can trade these things throughout the day. You don't have to wait and get the end of the day closing value at the end of the day. And so they're a little bit more flexible, more liquid, lower cost. Most importantly, ETFs have a dramatically lower average cost than a mutual fund. And it used to be that all ETFs were really just index funds. When they were first created, they tracked the S&P 500, the price of gold, maybe real estate markets, and so they tried to track the performance of those certain types of indexes. Now there's a lot more opportunity to get involved in even actively managed ETFs today. There's value-based ETFs today. There's a lot of other opportunity out there in the ETF space that gives us more flexibility, better liquidity, lower cost, more tax efficiency than we're going to find with a mutual fund. So for the most part, we're not really utilizing any mutual funds anymore. Most of our positions have shifted over to ETFs. However, there is occasionally an opportunity that we will find in the mutual fund space. If we find a low-cost mutual fund that's historically outperformed their benchmark, we may utilize it, but I think it needs to be something we exercise caution in because there are some real pitfalls of mutual funds. Just from a cost perspective, Lee, the Wall Street Journal did a study with Forbes, released this in 2016, and this Forbes article pointed out that the average expense ratio is about 1.5% for a U.S.-based mutual fund, and then once they include their transaction expenses that don't actually make up that expense ratio, it doubles the cost of the average U.S. equity mutual fund. So we've found that people are paying 2, 3, 4, 5% in mutual funds. We audited a portfolio the other day, $225,000. This gal was paying over $7,000 in fees and expenses, and she was only paying 1.25% to her advisor. So about $2,000 a year to the advisor. A good bulk of those funds were going to the mutual fund expenses, and we were able to cut those costs for her down by more than 2/3. So make sure you understand these things.
Man, that is a great example of why it's a good idea to use the number on your screen and request a meeting with a member of the Howard Bailey team. You just heard Casey explain how much fees and expenses they were able to take out of that woman's portfolio. What about for you? What about long-term care? Is there a provision in your portfolio now for that? Maybe there should be, and they'll help you find the way to do that. And also, income you can't outlive. All important things we'll review when you sit down with a member of the Howard Bailey team for a complimentary review of your particular financial situation. So I hope you call the number on your screen to get that scheduled. All right, let's move on to our question of the day. It has to do with the S&P 500. How much did it lose during the financial crisis of 2008? We have the answer coming up.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
It's your retirement. How will you live it? How will you be remembered?
Will you be able to take me on vacation?
Will you be there for my ball games?
Will you teach me your values? You'll be able to play with me.
Oh, help me go to college. How will I remember you?
Sure hope our question of the day didn't bring back too many painful memories. The question was, what was the S&P? How much did the S&P 500 lose during the financial crisis of 2008? Casey?
Well, Lee, that number is 56.4%, and that can start to fade into distant memory, and we kind of become disconnected with how bad that period of time was, how painful it really was. And especially if we're getting close to retirement, I think we need to recognize how painful it really was, and that we may not be able to go through a period of time like that. Maybe we can't wait on recovery like we were able to wait during our working years. And so we start asking the question, we say, well, where are we now? Are we at a period of time where we are going to experience another bear market? Are we going to see another 2008-like financial crisis in the near future? What's next? And so we're getting this question more and more today, and the only way we can do that is by looking back throughout the past, because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but we can look back throughout the past, we can see what's happened throughout history, and we can apply that to where we're at today. And one of the experts. One of the most famous stock market authorities in history was Richard Wyckoff. And he developed this idea that it's not just bull markets and bear markets, but there's actually 4 different periods that the market goes through, these different cycles that we experience that lead us into the next cycle, whether that's a bear market or a bull market. We have to recognize, most importantly, these periods of time between the bear markets and bull markets. So a bull market is a period of time of continually increasing prices. We see the market continue to grow. A bear market is quite the opposite. We start seeing lower and lower lows over a period of time while the market starts to fall. And so we have bear markets, we have bull markets. What's next? Where are we at? We know that every bull market ends in a bear market, but when does that actually occur? So let's walk through these 4 phases that Wyckoff put together for us. He starts with a period of time of accumulation. During that period of time of accumulation, at the far left-hand corner of your screen, that's a period of time when the market feels kind of flat, and we're seeing this happen after a period of time of market decline. So the markets decline, and now the buyers start to see opportunity. They start buying back into the market, and the market kind of bumbles along, and it feels like we found a bottom. Then we feel this period of time of markup. Now we see these this is what we really think of as bull markets, periods of time like 2013 or the last several years even, where we see markets going up 30% in a single year. What we saw back in the 90s, up 30%, up 30%, up 30%. These are periods of time that are very exciting. Then we have this period of time of distribution. So we say, well, maybe we've reached a top. Now the sellers start to gain hold, and we begin to see the market start to falter. And that leads us into decline. The sellers really gain control, and we lead ourselves into what we think of as a bear market. And what's really amazing is that Richard Wyckoff did this research back in the 30s, and it's still being applied to today. And there's classes, there's courses out there that you can take to become as knowledgeable about the things that Richard Wyckoff taught as he was back in the day. Because of this, if we overlay that research from 92 to 2003, we can see how well it lines up to what happened during those periods of time. We have a period of accumulation following the late 80s. We have a period of accumulation during the 90s. The market begins to climb, leading us into markup. Now the second largest bull market in history. We have the 90s, up 30%, until we get to the late 90s and the market begins to falter. During a period of time of distribution, we begin to question whether these tech stock prices are really justified. Then the market pulls back during that 2000 to 2003 time frame. We have a bear market, and that is our decline. Then we have 2002 to 2009. During 2002 to 2009, we start to gain back our footing during the bottom of 2002, 2003, during a period of time of accumulation. Then, as the buyers begin to buy back in, the market begins to take off during this period of time of markup, leading up to 2007. Then we have the financial crisis. But prior to that, we started to see the market falter. It pulled back, it popped, and then we saw the major decline. We saw this major pullback leading us into the bottom of 2009 and that 54% loss over that entire period of time of the financial crisis. Now, what's kind of concerning is applying that to where we're at today. If we look at the period of time of accumulation following the financial crisis, leading us into markup that we experienced from 2011 through 2017, then we see this period of time of distribution that has arguably occurred over the last year to 2 years. And it begins to bumble along. We say, are we in decline? Are we in a period of time of distribution? All we know is that at some point in the future, we're going to feel decline. And so what I would encourage you to do is recognize how long that decline can take in order to make up for. If we look at the S&P 500, historically, you often think, well, the market always comes back. I actually had a gentleman the other day say, there's never been a period of time in history, no matter where you invested, that the market wasn't higher after 10 years. Well, obviously false, because we can see periods of time just over the last several years. We saw 16 years after the 2000 tech bubble burst. We saw it take 16 years to get back to even. On an inflation adjusted basis, it would have been a couple years shorter had we not factored in inflation. We can go all the way back to the 1929 time period after the Great Depression. It took almost 30 years just to get back to that original investment. And this is a chart that's so often shared, and I really like to look at it because we often say, well, the market makes a heck of a lot more in the bull markets than it loses in the bear markets, and that's actually not statistically true. If we look at these losses, we can see a loss of 190, a gain of 369 on an inflation-adjusted basis, a loss of 369. So the gain matched the loss. Up 224, down 200, up 127, down 100, up 600, down 500, up 1900 in the 90s, followed by a 1,000-point loss. Then we had a 700-point gain leading up to 07, 08, down 965, up 2,000 over the last several years. So where not is the market right now? I think the more important question is, where are you right now? How are you positioned? Are you positioned to take advantage of a period of decline? Do you have some dry powder on the sidelines that you're going to be able to take advantage of depressed prices once they actually occur? Are you fully invested and looking for retirement income to start in the next couple of years, and you can't wait 10 plus years for the market to rebound after the next decline? Are you in retirement, drawing on retirement income out of that retirement portfolio, and you don't have the ability to wait 5 years, 3 years, 10 years for the market to recover and not violate that #1 rule of investments?
That is something to be thinking about, something many people are nervous about. And if you're not sure exactly where you are at, here's a good opportunity to find out. Call the number on your screen and schedule some time to meet with a member of the Howard Bailey team and take a look through your portfolio to find out what kind of risk is there. Are you provisioned well to survive a big downturn in the market, or are you really in jeopardy? How will your income flow through those years, and what happens if a long-term care need comes along? So many questions are ahead when you face retirement. So that's why I hope you'll take the time to call the number on your screen and schedule a complimentary financial review with a member of the Howard Bailey team, learning more about exactly where you're at now and what it will take to put you on the path toward retiring with purpose. We're glad you joined us today. We hope that you'll see us again next week.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
It's your retirement. How will you live it? How will you be remembered?
Will you be able to take me on vacation?
Will you be there for my ball games?
Will you teach me your values? You'll be able to play with me.
Oh, help me go to college. How will I remember you?